Granny turned up with an ice cream van and did handbrake turns in the yard, skidding in circles and ringing the bell, and that were good 'cause we had been busy and hot. That were later. After we had had lunch we had been hanging about and getting in the way. Auntie Myrtle said she'd do her mind reading trick. It were rotten when Auntie Myrtle did her bloomin' mind reading trick. It was boring and stupid and went on and we knew the answer anyway. A grey elephant from Denmark. I didn't know why and I didn't care, and neither did you or anyone, but she did it anyway. Think of a grey elephant from Denmark, Auntie Myrtle would shout, and we'd all groan and tell her to shut up, but she'd carry on. Now think of a number. So we thought of a number, but I told you my number, and you wouldn't tell me your number, so I changed my number and we fought. Then we had to add the number to some other number and square it, she said, what didn't make sense, and we'd need a computer. And we had to cut the number in half and double it and stuff. We got it all wrong and I had to put letters to numbers and think of a country in Europe beginning with D, but we didn't know one. But Grandad said Deutschland because he was smart, or said he was, but Granny said he was wrong. Deutschland wasn't English, so shut up. Then we had to think of a letter and change it into a number or into a colour or something and add it to the numbers you had already, and the answer was going to be grey elephant from Denmark. But I said grey wasn't a colour, it were a shade and didn't count, and you said it were a colour anyway, and we fought. Then Auntie Myrtle tells everyone to think of any animal they want, so long as it's an elephant. So we do. And then she said, I can see you're thinking of a grey elephant from Denmark, and we all yawn. It were pathetic. Then, to make it worse, she would do the whole thing again. She were insane. When she got to some bit that went, now divide the original number by 6, square it and take away 5, Mum said, we need a bloomin' computer, and Granny said, I'll sort it, and cartwheeled out of the door. Grandad said, I'll get some cables. Dad cleared a space by kicking us out, and Mum started bossing people about. I'll be in charge of the computer, she said, and the kids are not allowed near it at all. But we yelled that that's not fair, and carried on until Dad said shut up and you'll do as you're told. Then we heard Granny come back. We could tell by the yelling and screeching of tyres that she had got something sorted, and she crashed through the wall driving a bloomin' great truck with a BBC written on the side. Bound to be computers, Granny screamed, leaning out of the cab and spitting on the floor. She cackled, drooled, slammed the truck in reverse and got it back out into the yard. Dad collected his spare pile of bricks and Uncle Ted mixed cement in the bath using his spare wooden leg. Granny parked the truck while Dad rebuilt to the wall. Grandad stuck in some electricity. Auntie Myrtle boiled up some homemade paint and Mum and me painted the wall. We went out to the yard when we had got it all normal and went back of the truck where Dad accidentally broke the lock and knocked the lever what made the ramp come down. It were right dark in the truck and we couldn't see inside. Then we heard a grating sound like something were moving around. There's someone in the truck, said Mum. But they didn't come out. Then there was that grating sound and Uncle Ted said, maybe it's an animal. But even Ginger the cat, who had come out to see what were happening, looked a bit doubtful. You had better check it out, Dad said to me, so we can tell the BBC what we've got. We've got their truck, I said. I didn't want to go into the truck, it was spooky. But he said shut up and get in the truck. Then the sound came again and I wouldn't. So we just stood there. It were feeble. Then we saw a shape in the darkness and the noise started again and something were coming out. And it weren't a person and it weren't an animal and it had us dead worried. Then the thing rolled right out into the sun, tipped towards us and rolled down the ramp. We all ran. It were a Dalek. We stopped running after a bit. Mum said, what are we running for? It's not real and it's probably got a computer in it. She went back to look at the Dalek. It was just standing there. It had a plunger as an arm and Dad said we'll clear the sink with it. And it had a sort of ray gun, and I said I wanted it, and you said you wanted it, because you saw it first, which wasn't true, so we fought. And Grandad got some cables and hooked up the telly to the Dalek and said, now we've got a computer. And he put the telly on, and then the Dalek said annihilate, and a beam came out of its ray gun and turned Auntie Myrtle's favourite hydrangea into a pile of ash. Granny hit the Dalek with her hook, Uncle Ted bashed it with his wooden leg, and Mum put her dishcloth over its eye. I won't be having it, she said, and the Dalek couldn't do now. Something's come up on the telly, shouted Grandad, waving screwdrivers and plugs. We looked at the telly, and it were football, and Dad were playing, what was impossible, because he didn't play football. But on the telly he were fantastic. He were centre forward, and everyone was cheering him on, and he got past all the defenders and scored. He were incredible. Mum was gobsmacked. Dad just looked sort of embarrassed. It's impossible, shouted Mum, and hit me on the head for no reason. She was flummoxed, and it were impossible. Then Granny shouted, it's the blooming Dalek, it's reading his mind. And she swung the Dalek around so its plunger were pointing at me, and the screen went blank. That proves it, she shrieked, and pointed it at you, and there were a picture of you stealing my watch. Now I knew you had stolen it all the time, so we fought. Then Granny turned the Dalek on Uncle Ted. Mum threw a fit and wouldn't let us look and told Uncle Ted he needed help, but then Granny turned the Dalek onto Mum, and there she were, all dressed up proper and posh, and shaking hands with people from EastEnders what were famous, and we all laughed, and Mum shouted to turn it off, it weren't true. Then Granny turned the Dalek toward Grandad, and when she saw what he were thinking about, there were trouble and we had a rumpus. Then the Dalek said, "Annihilate" again, fired another ray and fried the cat. And that were that. Mum, she weren't having it no more. She bunged up the ray gun with a sponge, turned the Dalek upside down and stuck it in the yard as a flower pot. Granny and Uncle Ted went off to dump the truck and got arrested for fighting while driving a stolen truck through a police station, and Granny escaped by doing that horrible thing she does when she's angry and saying she'd do it again if they didn't let her go, and Uncle Ted pinched some woman's bum but what she was a woman policeman, so she locked him up. Granny left him behind but picked up some ice cream on the way back, so like I said, that was good, and that was the day we got a computer.